Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Constructive Conversations. The intention of this podcast is to explore the mindset and actionable approaches that empower entrepreneurs to achieve holistic success while inspiring listeners to confidently pursue their own ambitious dreams. The reason I do this podcast is because 10 years ago, I knew I wanted to start a business, but I had no idea where to start, no role models, and not enough confidence. So the goal is to provide that inspiration for new entrepreneurs and to provide fuel for those who are already doing it. So on the show today with Jalal, we talk about how to raise capital, what it's like running a startup, going public on a crypto exchange, how to build a leadership team, finding the right technical people, overcoming imposter syndrome, delegating, and a lot more. So make sure you listen to this whole episode. It's a great conversation. Joining us today is Jalal Ibrahimi. Jalal is an entrepreneur and driving force behind OSIS World, a decentralized platform committed to creating a new economic system based on equal opportunity, helping users transition from Web 2 to Web 3. His innovative projects, including CoinCare and Ethos, have garnered attention from major publications like Forbes and Yahoo Finance. Jalal, thanks so much for joining today. It's great to see you. Great to have you on.
Hey, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I appreciate you. So, yeah, let's get right into it. What is OSIS? Tell us about OSIS. What does it do?
Sure. It's honestly, you did a pretty good job of summing up the general vibe of it. The word equal opportunity really stands out. OSIS, in less technical words, is a platform. I think it actually aligns a lot with what your goal with what you said this podcast is all about, where we want to empower people who want to do business, who want to try to start their own business, into being able to do it on more of a global scale, into bringing more equal opportunity, more fairness onto the internet and people's activities online, especially. So we're doing things like redefining the relationship between a platform and content creator, for example. Most internet traffic is driven by platforms like YouTube and other social medias, where you go and you find your favorite creator who puts their time, money, energy, blood, sweat, and tears into creating something beautiful or interesting for you or helpful, and they're getting pennies on the dollar. Like quite literally pennies on the dollar. It's even worse in the music industry and almost non-existent in like the film and acting industry. But what we're doing with our platform is making it so that instead of the platform, us taking every single sponsorship dollar and every single advertising dollar, we're funneling that to the people that are being advertised to. So that's just one aspect of what it boils down to. Rather than pennies on the dollar, they're making dollars on the dollar on our platform. Another aspect of world would be we've taken things like borders and currencies, where you work on a Canadian dollar, I work in the US dollar, we have a little bit of a problem. We got to pay crazy fees to transfer. And say if I was in Asia and you were trying to do business with me, it would be even more difficult to find some kind of middle ground. We've built a way for people to have a middle ground and still operate in their own home currency, but tap into this new emerging digital currency market, things like Bitcoin and USDT stable coins. They call them cryptocurrencies, but ultimately they're just a digital form of what we use every single day with each other. We simplify that process for people so that they can transact online regardless of where you are and what currency that you use, with way less red tape, with way less fees and cost, and open people up to like basically the entire world. Over 180 countries are supported, 180 currencies, even some of the ones that you literally can't do business with here in Canada because of crazy banking regulations and stuff. But in short, it's an app, it's a social media. It also has a financial aspect to it, where you get a wallet, you can do business all over the world. And we want to treat people more fairly and redefine this relationship between platforms and the people who use them.
That's amazing. The global reach and like sort of the global impact and intention is that's on a big scale. So how did this come to be? What was your journey like that you ended up as the founder of this platform and OSIS World?
Good question. I got to take that back to like how I was born, or where I was born even more. So my background is Afghan. I was born in the Middle East. During war times, my family basically left Afghanistan because of the war in 94, 95. And so I was born in a neighboring country called Pakistan, where it was a lot more chill. And from that point on, when I was very, very young, we came to Canada. I grew up in Canada. I got educated here. I got like I got a life that I never could have had back in Afghanistan. I've got family and friends who I've seen just the difference in opportunity, difference in just the tools that are available to me versus what would be if I grew up there. And it's incredible. It's mind blowing. And the sacrifice I've seen from my family to put me in that kind of a position, to give me equal opportunity to everybody else in I guess the Western world right now, is someone that inspired me specifically. So that seeing my family, parents, extended family to sacrifice everything that they have, learn a new language, do something that, you know, most people would never want to do. Most people would never want to leave their community, leave what they're used to, and just go to this foreign land where people are not so nice, especially around 2001 for whatever reason, and grow up and raise their kids in a low-key hostile environment, alien environment. But they made that sacrifice to put me specifically in position, like their children and you know, the generations to come, in position to have the tools and to have the equal opportunity. So that has stuck with me very strongly growing up and coming into the workforce instead of going to, so I graduated from university with an accounting degree, a Bachelor of Commerce, instead of diving into accounting where I felt like I can make no impact at all and I wasn't doing anyone any favors except for maybe myself. I was like, I want to do something bigger. I've been blessed with a certain amount of education and ability to at least try. So I tried 2018, got into like the tech industry specifically. I've always been into technology. And from there until now, raised millions of dollars, impacted a lot of different people, done a lot of things online and offline. OSIS was born out of a vision that actually my co-founder had in 2014, but it was so early when he had this vision that the technology and even the culture for it just didn't exist yet at that stage. But in 2021, it did. Like, it came to life, and we had just done really well with the launching of CoinCare. What you saw perhaps in the Forbes article, where we had a huge opportunity during the pandemic to help small businesses with like getting back to business funding. Government was issuing funding in North America, all over the US and Canada, but we were US based at the time. And so we had a bunch of money, we invested it into OSIS, and it came to life. More than 25 employees all around the world, thousands of community members. And it's been a super exciting journey since 2024 now. Wow.
Yeah, and that's impressive. From 2014 to 2020, holding that vision, you know, until the technology and the, you know, the culture was responsive enough to say, oh yeah, this is in line. That's impressive. So yeah, talk more about sort of like seeding and you know, starting up this venture. So you put your own money in. Did you raise money? What was that process, or what did that look like?
Yeah, I put my own money in. One of the best pieces of advice someone gave me on my very first venture, 2018, I was still in school, and I was talking to this guy about fundraising, and I was like, how do I get investor money? And the first thing he told me is, don't do it. He's like, don't, just bootstrap until you have something. Doesn't matter how long it takes, bootstrap until you got something, and if it's good, the money will come. And he was right. He was right, because I didn't take his advice initially, and I went and I raised capital, and it was too early. There is such a thing. A lot of people want to, you know, a lot of people have a good idea and they want to jump into it, and it's fine and all. Like, you can get investment on, you know, a line, an idea on a piece of paper. Like, you could write your idea on a piece of paper and you can get investment. You can definitely do that. But there are trade-offs with everything. There's pros and cons. So I learned that early in my career, that there is such thing as the wrong money, but you can get funding for just about anything if it's a half decent idea, and if you yourself can back it up with some kind of domain expertise and experience to the investors that you're speaking to. People will put money into your venture. A lot of startups get funded every year. People look at the statistics and they get discouraged, but no, a lot of startups do get funded. If you can speak to the right people, you will get some backing, whether it's a little bit of money or it's millions. Yeah. So after a couple of experience experiences with CoinCare and Ethos getting investment for those companies. With OSIS, we were like, all right, let's start it ourselves. Let's put our money into it. It's a crazy idea. It's still way ahead of its time in terms of technology. We had to develop stuff and patent stuff ourselves that had not been done yet in the past couple of years. Just from initial conversations, I knew it would be tough to go and call up some of these investors that we knew or just people in the industry. So we're like, okay, let's put our own money into this, take it to where we got something that's presentable, that we can share with, private investors and potentially with the public. With what we're doing, we're in like the digital currency space, so regular people can participate as well. And so we ended up going for plan B, because we're like, we got to build a community for OSIS, and what better way to build a community than have people who are like invested into what you're doing, not just intellectually or emotionally, or maybe they send a few messages a day in a forum. It's like, no, they're really like, hey, I put some of my money into this and I want to see it succeed. I believe in the utility that it's going to bring me in the future. And so it was, rather than convince one guy, it was appeal to a large group of people. Find your tribe, find your vibe, bring them in, and build together. And this is the first time I've ever done that with the company, where it was crowdfund over private investment. And I personally like the crowdfund part. Crowdfund way better.
Yeah, like you said, you get to build the tribe. So then the people you're working with are people who want, they themselves want to be there. That's great. So you took the advice. You didn't go and get funding right away, and then once you had something built, then you could open that up to the public, and then crowdfund from there. Okay, that's awesome. And yeah, what does OSIS look like today? Like you mentioned briefly, like your team, a team of 25. Yeah. So what's your operations look like now?
In terms of company structure, we're still very much a startup, super scrappy, save on every single penny that we can, and very heavily invested in development activities. It is a technology company. Like I said earlier in the call, I myself had to go from being like a finance guy to being an engineer. I've been in the space for long enough that like it was not an extremely crazy transition, but I had to go and pick up some serious technical skills to push the company forward and to really understand my devs and the whole industry on a much more intimate level. OSIS today looks like a company that just went public several months ago and then went private again, and is now pushing out our flagship product in the next couple of months. So it's a pretty exciting time. Everybody's like grinding.
Yeah. Can you talk about that some more, like going public and then going private? What did that look like?
It was an absolute ordeal. One of the craziest things I've ever done in my life, in my career from a business perspective, is go public. Now, this is not in the traditional sense of going public like an IPO on the stock market, or like a penny stock, small cap. It was going public on a cryptocurrency exchange. We have a currency that is called OSIS in the project. It's used for all kinds of different things, especially with the flagship product release. It'll be used for all kinds of different, like purely utilitarian things. But going public earlier this year was an opportunity. It was like an exit for a certain crowd of people. We were like, okay, we've got a certain amount of people who've been here since 2021, and they want an exit point. They want the liquidity to sell their tokens and to get US dollars back, for example. And so we created that opportunity for them. This was like a promise from us to our larger community, and that's several thousand people at this stage. And we gave them that opportunity. It put OSIS on the map. We got like millions and millions of impressions just organically from the fact that we went public, which was really, really cool. I didn't expect that much. I didn't expect it to kind of like have this cool cascading effect where now everybody's heard of the project, which is super cool. But gave people an opportunity. We gave them the liquidity. Over $4 million was generated for people. So everybody turned a profit, which was fantastic. Nothing more I'd like to hear as a founder and a person that people supported than, them turning a profit and winning from being involved. This is an opportunity that is not often afforded to traditional companies that have to be kind of stuck in traditional markets. It's not often that like an early stage angel investor gets to cash out before the project is at some level of maturity. So we're definitely not.
That like you said, when you made the decision to crowdfund instead of going for like venture capital investors at that time, like that's when you gave the opportunity to the public, right? Who otherwise wouldn't like be in that situation. So that's awesome that you chose that route, and then and then it worked out for these people who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity.
Exactly. And we're like a living, breathing, what do you call that? Like example of what we're also trying to allow people to do in our platform. Someone that like, okay, you can go like the traditional path, or you can do this, and you got way more options. And you don't have to be an American company or a Canadian or a UK based company. You could be from like Egypt, and you could still make something happen and have the support of people all around the world for what your project or idea is, whether it's product, service, or something big where you actually need to crowdfund for. That stuff can happen here. But yeah, so we are like a living use case scenario for our own application. We had to do everything from scratch and invest in all of it ourselves from scratch. And now we're able to kind of replicate that and automate it for people. But going public was great. People made money. People had their chance to like sell out while we're still at the halfway point. It was like a pit stop. Let a bunch of people be able to sell out. Let a bunch of more people buy in because we closed our round, right? And then we sealed that. So we let it open for the entire summer. We closed it. Once everybody was like, all right, we're good, we're happy, everyone's cool, sweet. And we were able to just smoothly transition off. No complaints, no problems. Everyone, it was one of those situations where basically everyone was happy. There's always people who are unhappy with stuff, but that's life. That's like, you can't please the 1% and throw away your 99% of people, right? Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. So then you close it. So then sort of the opportunity repeats itself again for whoever's on board now. So what are the goals for the company moving forward? What does the future look like?
Huge goals in this year. So we want to release this project, the one that I've been personally coding with the team as well. I'm in the trenches now with that. It's been super exciting to have my hands like on the job in that way. But at this end of this year, hoping to get by Christmas to have something released that would do a few different things, like the ability to do business worldwide where currency doesn't matter. That would be in there, and the ability to create and post content in the platform, and loosely provide a product or a service to other people. We won't have we may not have certain verification features and things like that just yet. Probably will. But okay, overall, have an app that does all the things you need to do financially out by the end of this year. And then a huge goal would be actually going public again sometime in probably Q2 next year, with a lot more momentum with the application. Going public as in just making the token available to people on a wider scale. That'll be available in our own platform. People need to use OSIS tokens in our platform to do different transactions, to do things like vote, and to use it to pay fees and things like that, like transaction fees. But we would expand that offering to more people by going on more public exchanges, it's always an interesting experience. I've done it once, and I'm ready to do it again this coming year. So those are the two major, like, you'll see it in the headlines things. But personally and internally, I'm really excited to see the vision come to life. It's been 10 years for Chris, my co-founder. It's been 10 years of like seeing this thing and thinking about it and trying to figure out, a solution to these problems, and finally having something that we can legitimately put in front of someone and be like, hey, yeah, this solves your problem. Try it at least. This did not exist before. This possibility didn't even exist. These tools, they weren't a thing until we just put them out. So I'm really excited to see that come to life and the impact that it has socially and in the business world. And as we scale, I'm going to be super excited the day that like other platforms are like, oh crap, we're losing customers and users because we're not treating them right. And other platforms are. And it would be cool to start at least be a part of. I know probably not starting the wave, but being a part of that to bring more fairness into platforms and their users and their creators, especially.
Awesome. Those are great goals. So you mentioned your co-founder, Chris. Can you speak on the co-founder relationship? And secondly, my question is, do you have sort of like a visionary integrator dynamic? Is that there, or sort of do you have the same roles? Yeah, how does that look?
That's a really good question, man. That is a really good question. And I'm fortunate to have a great relationship with my co-founder. and the fact that we're very complementary. So like you said, visionary integrator, we are very much visionary integrator. That's one of the main reasons we don't butt heads. When you have two type A personalities, or you have two like strong personalities, leader types in the same room trying to lead the same thing, it can often get very, very difficult. People have egos, and someone's like, no, I'm right, and the other person's like, no, I'm right, we should do it this way. You simply can't have that in your management or leadership. You need a clear, defined role for people in a hierarchy when it comes to building something that is maintainable and scalable. You cannot have two heads butting when trying to build something like this. Like if anyone listening to this in the future is like, oh crap, all I do is butt heads with this person I want to make my co-founder, it's like, dude, that is not going to work. I promise you that is not going to work. It can't at scale. It can't, especially when you have more responsibility on you, or when you have more attention on you. It simply does not work. You need clear, defined roles, and the ability to follow yourself too. Even if you are a leader person, it's like you're not really a good leader until you know how to follow really well. So the dynamic is very visionary integrator. In the past few years, we've learned to be even more flexible with things like that. Like sometimes I will completely lead something and he is completely hands off and cool with it, or vice versa. But at the end of the day, he is our CEO, he is our visionary, and what he sees, like I'm 100% there for it. So there is a clear hierarchy. A lot of people see us as co-CEOs, and you could possibly say that, but I don't hold that role, and I know that he's the better person for that job. So like anybody looking at me, they're like, yo, I'm deferring to him. We make it clear in the organization, even if it might not be clear at face value to a lot of people. A lot of people, even people who work for us, don't even realize until it's like, a few meetings in, they've been hired. They're talking to me a lot because I'm very active in the integration part. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super important, and that's great that you have that relationship, because like you said, that makes it work to have the balance and not to butt heads. So on this journey to building OSIS, did you have mentors? Did you connect with people in the industry, or where did you turn for guidance when you needed to make important decisions?
Yeah, this is also a good question. Mentors are extremely beneficial and important. A lot of my mentorship in the tech world I got from somebody in 2018-19. He was like an old industry. He's been all over the business world. The dude was like basically retired, and he actually worked with me on one of my previous startups. He taught me everything I know about like legal, to the point where like he basically made me into like a lawyer in that 1 year being mentored by the guy. His mentorship was interesting too. It was, I don't even know how to describe it. It was something you simply could not read in a book. You could not get from watching a YouTube video. Is all I can say. Very motivational and very intense. With OSIS specifically being my fourth venture, I did not have any specific mentor like I did in 2018 when I first got into the tech world. What I can say is that having a mentor in your field that is naturally older than you, more experienced than you, is better to say, is like there's no amount of money you could pay for that kind of education. Like they will help you cut down like a decade into a very short amount of time of their experience and be able to gift that to you. I found that with OSIS, well, really with this era, with my fourth venture, I'm starting to see that, I don't know if this is cliche, but it's almost like everybody and almost everything can play the role of mentor, depending on how perceptive and aware you are of your experiences with them, whether they're like a child or like they're an older person talking about what you're doing to them. You will get feedback every single time, whether it's a conscious feedback or unconscious, whether it's coming from an experienced person or totally experienced. There's value in what a person will reflect back to you when you share what you're talking about, whether they're reflecting back to you based on the information because they understand it, or the feeling. I feel a lot of people discount this concept of how other people feel, but when you're in business, you're building stuff for other people. How they feel is almost always more important than what they might logically think about your product. So it's been an interesting experience speaking to different people from different walks of life and learning from them about what they think about perhaps what I'm doing in OSIS or what I'm doing in the industry or product feature or what the product looks like. A random child's perspective and opinion is still valuable. It's still marketing data that you're getting. It's still data that you're receiving. And so I find that kind of in place of mentorship. I do get mentored every day by my co-founder. I'm lucky there. I'm fortunate there, more than lucky, to have somebody that's wise way beyond his years and experienced way beyond his years to be able to teach me and guide me through a lot of the things, especially when it comes to, you've got a growing company, you've got a lot more responsibility than you have ever had before. Like myself, my experience, having somebody to help you stay grounded and see different perspectives, or perhaps tell you to, hey, chill out because you're doing too much, or you're missing something, or you need to stop and look at things a different way, think outside the box. Having someone around to recognize that and tell you that is priceless as well. And I feel like that also fills this role of mentorship as well, because I'm getting something from that. I'm always getting something from this relationship internally in the company, and of course from everybody that I speak to on a daily basis, including this conversation.
Yeah, that's a super deep insight. That what I'm hearing is, like, your teachers are all around you. Like if you have, the mindset of a learner, and like, yeah, I want to pick up what, the world's feeding back to me, is you can learn from basically every interaction. And so it's more about like your lens and your perspective, and that gives you the feedback that you need to
yeah like fundamentally with every action there's a reaction. So you got to like look like really big picture, zoom out and be like, okay, what has my mindset been this past X amount of time, and what is my reality kind of responding to that as? Because if you're like a person that is constantly anxious about something going wrong, usually that thing goes wrong, because that's like, that's all you're focused on. That's how you're unconsciously, you're doing things afraid of something happening, and it's like, well, now you're doing things to make that happen at the same time. But yeah, all of life is constantly reflecting back to you and giving you some kind of feedback on your mindset and your actions and the time that you're spending and what you're putting your energy towards. That's why it's very valid that everybody and everything is giving you feedback and mentoring you in one way or another. Life is mentoring you in one way or another.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then also in terms of learning, do you connect with a lot of other, like tech startup leaders? Like, do you have, sort of networks that you go to and connect with, or are you more, just laser focused on your work and do less of those connections?
At one point, I was very, very, very connected and spent a lot of my time and energy learning from other people who were in the industry. Lately, because I have a clear vision of what I want and what I'm trying to accomplish, I am more laser focused. But anytime I have a question or a doubt or a thought, it's one of the first things I do is reach out to someone who's been through that before. For example, we're doing something financial related, and anytime you talk money and you want to put something in the App Store, well, Apple and Google come knocking for their percentage. So I'm like, how do you work with that? How do you work with that? I'm not gonna, I could sit around and Google the answer all day, or I could call somebody who I know that has been through it and be like, hey, what is your experience with that? It's often the fastest way to get to what you're trying to get to. If you can find someone, and you can, the internet is too big and wide, and it's too easy to find people in different forums that might be going through something that you want to do. Call them up, shamelessly ask them. It's okay. People like to talk about their experiences, and it's definitely more valuable to yourself, I promise you, talking to someone who's experienced something before, than Googling or YouTubing or like using AI to try to figure out a problem. Most things are more nuanced than you can get on the internet. That you can only go so deep on the internet.
Absolutely. Yeah, you have to talk to people. There's a chapter in my book that explains, the human mind is the most advanced quantum computer, like use that resource, and like each one is programmed with a whole different learning set. And yeah, why wouldn't you use that resource? That's good advice. Yeah, I'm interested. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced on the path of leading a startup?
Personally, in the tech space, I'll talk about an external challenge and then an internal challenge. External challenge for me in the tech space was finding the right technical people, the right developers, just because I'm coming into a domain that I don't have experience in. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. And I've spent years, I'm not even kidding, dude, hundreds of interviews with technical people. And I would say less than 1% of these people were actually like solid, qualified, in hindsight, less than 1% of them were like actually good for the job. But all 100% of them were blowing smoke and talking all kinds of beautiful, great, flashy things because they want to get a job. I can understand that part, but it's one thing to completely overestimate your competency and misrepresent yourself. And then, I've paid more than 6 figures out to people who like were absolutely not supposed to get that kind of money for what they couldn't do. So personally, on the business side, it's been extremely difficult finding the needles in the haystack. And fortunately, I found them, and I'm trying to become one myself. It took a long time, too long. I'll say that personally. It took me too long to be like, all right, bro, I need to learn what the hell this code stuff is. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to be inefficient, and the project will continue to be inefficient without a more intimate understanding from my side. So I had to learn, and I learned. So in the past year and a half, just been studying in my own time. And that has put me in a really, really good position for the project to succeed. We've done more in the last few months than like a year plus. Like the efficiency and productivity has gone up, like I would say 10x, because myself and my co-founder are now technically minded, and we can speak the language and recognize the fakers from the real ones. And less domain specific on a personal side, I would say one of the earliest things, and I think a lot of people go through this, is imposter syndrome, where that's probably how those developers felt when they got hired and they were asked to do something they couldn't do. But early on in my position as a tech founder, raising capital and having a grand vision, and honestly not knowing how to do everything. But I don't think really anybody knows how to do the whole thing when they get into something, right? Most people are like, all right, let me lay this one brick perfectly so I can lay the next one. There was still I experienced a lot of imposter syndrome early on. It took me years of experience to feel and realize that, like, I'm not a noob anymore. I've got a little bit more experience in this. For me, it took just grinding and gaining that experience to realize that, like, okay, you know what, I'm not an imposter. I don't feel like an imposter anymore. I can proudly say that I'm experienced in this, in what I'm doing. Like, you can trust that I'm going to give you good feedback. If a person wants to consult me on what I do, I'll be like, yeah, this is what it is. But early on, I think a lot of founders go through this when you're trying to sell something, especially, or when you're trying to sell yourself, because that's what it is. Early on in any business venture, it's like you may or may not have a product. In both scenarios, you're selling yourself. Person's not going to buy into you versus, like, a big company because your product is cheaper. Well, what about the quality? People are thinking all kinds of things. But if it's like if they feel a connection with you, then people are going to partner up with you. And that's investment is like 80%. Do I like this person, and do I feel like they can get the job done from an investor's perspective, rather than, do I like this idea, and do I think this idea is going to be great? It's like, well, you're the person who's going to bring it to life. So it's selling yourself. And that part was tricky. That part was all kinds of anxious. I'm talking about like 6-7 years ago, though. That's been difficult. And then the second most difficult part into getting into more of a mature founder position or leader position is transitioning from being the person at a business that does everything, you wear all the hats, to now having employees that are competent and that they're supposed to take a lot of these jobs, right? You're supposed to take off your hats and hand it to all these people. Transitioning from the worker and the guy who does everything to being the manager is a super, super interesting transition. And it's very, very much an internal thing. It has very little to do with what things look like on the outside. It's much more switching your mindset from what can I do and what needs to get done to one, trusting other people that you hired, but also making a big space. It wasn't a small space, a big space in your mind to think about how other people feel at all times, what they're thinking, what they're doing. You are keeping track of everyone else now. You are coordinating. And coordinating does not just stop at, hey, this is how you got to get your work done, right? Or these are the work goals. It also has to do with other people's emotional state and other people's day to day. Like a person could have a problem at home with their wife or kid or something, and like that, they might not even mention it, but they're bringing that baggage to the workplace. They don't, consciously, not doing it on purpose. But how can you, as a leader, help them shift from the, probably being depressed about something to back to focus on what they're doing, because it's your company's at stake. But at the same time, you don't want someone to be working at the workplace bringing everybody else down because they're in a crappy mood. It's your job as a leader to bring the joy out of people, to bring the excitement and passion and focus and all of these things. It's you're managing people's emotions positively, I hope. I don't believe in people cracking the whip on people and leading through fear. That is not scalable. But if it's through, passion and joy and excitement, it's much better for that guy, for you to help that guy get out of his, dark thoughts and pour his energy towards something, to his work that he likes, hopefully that he likes. I wouldn't hire you otherwise. And yeah, it's very fulfilling once you get a little bit more used to that. It took a lot of practice, a lot of me messing it up and making things worse for like a year until I was able to be in a more harmonious, be a constant positive impact on employees.
Yeah. So do you have advice for someone in that role? So they're just starting to delegate, to take the hats off, like you said, and give them out to people. What helped you to change your mindset and, like you said, create space, to accommodate like the employees and their needs?
Spend time studying yourself and other people. Everyone communicates differently. Everyone receives things differently. You could say that Twitter is a perfect example. If you say something, you're always going to have people who take that thing really badly or people who take that thing really positively. Neither of them are probably taking it the way that you perhaps meant it. And the same thing goes in person. If you speak in front of a crowd, some people are going to be like, yeah, some people are going to be like, it's why are they taking, how are they taking what you're saying? Who are these people that you're working with? How do they communicate? There's this school, there's this, I don't know if you want to call it like a subset of science or psychology called, I don't know if it's psychoanalysis, but there's something called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, how people understand words. It goes all the way down to, their childhood traumas or their childhood experiences, how people understand things. There's another layer to it too, where, and people learn this in sales, for example. If you do any kind of sales, people are primarily auditory, or people are primarily visual people, or kinesthetic people, where they feel, or everything's through physical touch, or some people are just more predominantly logical. And understanding what a person is and how they take in information will make all the difference in how you communicate with them. There's no one expression works for everyone. You do have to have a level of personal communication with everyone that you work with, at least directly. Perhaps a crowd is different, but anybody that you're delegating to personally, and you want them to get the job done right and do their best to the best of their ability, you got to know how they take that information in. If I'm speaking to somebody who is very artistic and creative, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain why the data makes sense, right? I'll explain what the impact of what they're doing has and how that might make people feel and what it might look like, for example. Like, whereas I might sit down with like a technical engineer and I'm not going to tell them about how happy well, maybe you might mention it, but it's not going to be, the conversation is not focused on, hey, so I want you to build this feature because it'll make people be able to draw nice things and do this and that and be creative and stuff. It's like, no, that guy might only be very, very logical. His job requires him to be logical. So it might be a more logical conversation where we talk about data, where I'm like, okay, this feature right here, you're going to put X amount of time and energy into this. The reason why this is a good idea is because that will equate to this much of an output in terms of money that we're going to get from this, a boost in profits in terms of this percentage of increased user retention. I'm not talking about user percentage in retention and any of that stuff with the creative director, the design director as much. So it really comes down to communication at the very most nuanced and subtle level too. Like I'm talking about real nuance. That person might say something and you tell them, I see what you mean. Or how do you feel about this? Or what do you see about that? Whereas with the technical guy, I'm asking them what they think about something, not about how they feel about something. I'm not going to ask him how he feels about something. He might not feel any type of ways because he's thinking about everything from a logical data perspective, which is his job, and which technical people naturally just end up in. That's just your mind frame all the time. And I can attest to that. You are super logical because you have to be. So I'm not going to ask you about how you're feeling today, because maybe if I remind you how you're feeling today, you might think about your bad situation at home. So all this stuff comes into play. Everything's a delicate balance, and it's super important you know how another person receives what you're talking about. No two people are the same at all.
Yeah, that's great advice. So adapt to the individual's communication style so that you can actually communicate effectively. That's very good. So we talked about challenges. What I want to hear, what's one of the sort of unexpected benefits that you've seen, from being a founder along your whole journey, something that you weren't expecting that, you're like, oh my, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. It could be personal, it could be professional.
It's okay. So it's probably the hardest thing I might ever do, or it definitely is the hardest thing I've ever done, going into business for myself as a founder. What people don't realize is just how much pressure there is on personal development. It took me years to realize that the success of your business and the speed at which you succeed, and also the scale at which you succeed at, is directly proportionate to your personal development. And I don't mean just your professional skills. I mean on an emotional level, on a fundamental level. Like you see how the extremes, you look at monks in Asia or in Nepal, and they're getting kicked in the balls and they have intense physical fortitude to get kicked in the balls. It's like that kind of, like, the deeper you get into, I'm not talking about getting kicked in the balls. Life kicks you in the balls as a founder. I mean more on the emotional side of things. Life will beat you down. Your business will beat you down, and you will never experience this stuff if you were in a job. You literally won't. You've got some level of security where you're working for somebody and they pay your check, and that's it. But when you're out there and you got to hunt for every meal every day, you can't sleep on the job. There's a constant pressure on you from a financial side, of course, but there's so much more. Even when you got a whole bunch of money, it's a whole different kind of financial pressure or emotional pressure that you get. There's no in between where it's nice and comfortable and chilling. At every point, you're going to be pushed to go harder, faster, stronger, and be better. And the only way you can do that on the external, in what your company and performance is, the only way you can do that and accomplish that is if you do it internally. So it is a constant challenge personally on every level. Count every trauma you've ever had in your life, you're going to face it in one way or another, one shape or form or another, through your business in the most unexpected ways possible. You're going to face the reason why you might be shy to speak in front of people because you were laughed at in grade 4 while you were doing a speech. Like, that stuff will come right back up, and you got to face it, and you got to give that speech because your whole company and career depends on it. It's that kind of pressure. People be shaking in their boots, but you got to go through the shaking. You got to stand on that damn stage and give that speech, and you're shaking, and you're going to botch it and whatever, but you still got to do it. And then you got to go in and do it again the next time, and the next time, until you actually get good at that. And the only way you're going to get good at that is if you face that fear from the past and get over it and get through it and become fundamentally a stronger, more well-rounded person on every level. You got to get all the emotional intelligence. As men, someone that we've neglected all our lives, it's you don't have a choice. You have to become deeply emotionally intelligent. You have to understand both men and women, because you're going to work with them. And if you're going to lead them, you need to be able to understand them. And the only way you can is if you understand yourself. So you got to face all your demons, and you got to do it in the service of other people who depend on you and count on you because you pay their check. And also, of course, yourself, because nothing's going to work unless you make it work. You have to make it work. Nothing just happens for you.
I love that you pick that out as the greatest benefit, is like, the pressure, sort of the nonstop pressure that forces you to develop yourself. So that brings me to what does or did your personal development look like for you? Like is that like a spiritual element? Yeah, sort of. Can you talk about that process of personal development?
Yes, I like to think, I like to feel too that life and experience is completely spiritual. Like you can't take the two apart, internal, external. Your external reflects your internal. So yes, it all has had a spiritual effect, or it has all been a spiritual experience, as visceral and as human as it might be. Where you're like that example of shaking in your boots because in grade 4, that was a real example. I was afraid of giving speeches and public speaking, but then I had to get on a stage and speak in front of thousands of people, and my company depended on it. And it is very spiritual. The deeper you get, the more you realize it gets deeper, and that it is very spiritual. Even if you don't believe in any of that, there's this intangible sense. And when you grow and when you mature emotionally, as you grow and as you face difficulties and feel the super extreme lows that a lot of people cannot relate with, you also feel these extreme highs that people also cannot relate with. Yeah, it's totally spiritual. It'll make a person believe. It's interesting to see very successful people who have gone through it, and you can see that they've gone through it. They've got a level of zen that you often don't see in cities or in modern culture, unless you go to the Nepal and to meet a monk, for example. Like a lot of these very successful people are they're internally, they're cool with who they are. They have a certain level of acceptance and self-realization that you wouldn't find in a normal place. So that it's very interesting to me that everything I do pushes me further up in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Social, you get bashed so much socially when you start a business and you do something that other people can't relate with, that you stop caring about social approval, for example. That's something that you get very early on and that a person has to overcome. Otherwise, if you care so much about what other people think, you're not going to get further in business.
Yeah, you stay stuck until you can handle it, until you can deal with it, right?
Yeah, people who can't relate or who might be jealous or who might, they can't believe in what you're doing. It's a lot of it has to do with they can't see themselves doing that. That's their own limitations, the kind of projecting it. It's like, well, that opinion doesn't help you. It doesn't help you. You learn pretty early on. So it's like, what's after the social hierarchy on the pyramid? It's like, well, now you're automatically at a higher stage of thinking, because you literally can't waste time thinking about what people think about you or what they say about you. If you want to win, you don't have the luxury to waste energy on that. So it's a cool, it ultimately is spiritual by default.
That's beautiful. Thanks for those insights there. So we're getting towards the end here. So I'll have some shorter questions.
Speed round.
Or it might not be. Depends on your answer. If you were to write a book, what would it be about?
Ooh, write a book, what would it be about? Damn. Well, first thing that comes to mind is a biography, autobiography, and perhaps in like 30 years or something. After I accomplish what I want to accomplish, I would write that.
Awesome. That's good. And then I can probably guess the answer to this, but do you prefer to hire employees or consultants?
I prefer to hire employees because I've had a lot of experience with consultants and mercenary types who just jump from one job to another. And I don't find the same level of commitment or care from mercenaries.
Reading or audiobooks?
For me, it's 90% audiobooks, 10% reading. I only read what I can't get in audiobook format.
Favorite hobby?
Favorite hobby? Sports of any kind. Anything to get me to touch some grass.
Emails, phone calls, or texts? Which do you prefer?
Depends on the context. I would prefer text for things that are not like things that don't need to go deep into, but it calls for anything that needs any level of depth. Communication should generally be as efficient as possible, though. So text.
Driving or being driven?
Being driven so I can do more.
Yeah, get more done. And yeah, any books that you're reading now, or just books that you'd recommend?
You know what? I saw on your story today that you were reading A New Earth. Whew, that book is unbelievable, and it's a very difficult read. not because it's a big or long book or it has crazy difficult words in it, more because of the content and the subject matter it's real serious stuff. So I would definitely recommend A New Earth. I love that you're reading that. I've read that book like literally 10 times. And yeah, it's a powerful book. Anybody listening to this, read A New Earth. You will have a hell of a time reading it.
Oh yeah. I finished it this morning. Yeah, and it's amazing. I ordered the paper so I can go get the highlighter out and go through it again.
Beautiful.
Awesome. That's great. Any other book recommendations?
Ooh, okay. If anybody's into fantasy epics, I would recommend, if you're taking some reading away from reading the normal dry self-development subject matter, there is a book that can help you with self-development in more of a creative way. And it's a series called The Stormlight Archives by the legendary Brandon Sanderson, the best fiction author I've ever read. And I just discovered him recently, and I'm like a few hundred books into the fiction and fantasy realm. I love the genre, and he is by far the best. So that's a good recommendation. The Stormlight Archives.
Awesome.
I forget what the first book was called. There's like 5 or 6 books in the series. I'm done the series though.
Awesome.
The Way of Kings. That's what the first book is called. The Way of Kings. Read it.
Awesome. Okay, definitely. That's great. That's great to get both the fiction, the nonfiction.
Balance.
All right. If people want to connect or contact you, how can they do that?
You can find me on Instagram at Jalal Ibrahimi, JALALIBRAHIMI. Just hit me up. See you there.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes as well, so people can find you there.
Cool.
Awesome. So it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I really appreciate your time and you coming on.
Hey man, thanks so much for having me. I love that you're podcasting and covering such an important topic. Lots of cool guests before me, so I'm excited to see who comes on next.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Well, take care, and yeah, thanks again.
Thanks, Dick.